I'm in the office. So since we last talked on camera, I think a lot has transpired in both of our lives. Arvind has a new young boy in the family.
I like how you're addressing
Um,
me as Arvin.
and then I started a new role at an AI company. So it's kind of an interesting time for us right now. And so we're just honestly trying to get back to things and record something and get something out there, just to talk a little bit about what's been going on in our personal lives. Then also just come back to some of the topics we usually like to keep discussing.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah. You want to talk fatherhood first?
yeah. Let's do fatherhood first. You want to start? How's it been going?
It's good, man. Actually, I kind of forgot how. So, for context, I have now, a 3.5-year-old daughter and a 6-week-old son now, and I actually forgot how relatively easy babies are, man, to compare to toddlers. Like,
Okay, okay.
I think the hot take is like babies are pretty chillin'. Like they're, I mean, obviously you can get like really hard babies. And I
Yeah,
think you had Gia was pretty hard because she was throwing up a lot, I think, right? She couldn't keep food down.
yeah. So our second one, she like all the regular problems that babies you've ever heard of having, like sleep and food intake and all of those things. She kind of had a flavor of something going on in each
Yeah.
of those realms. And so yeah, it wasn't super easy. And actually, the flip side for me was that I ended up spending a lot more time with Arya because Sri Ranjani was spending so much time with Gia, and Arya was actually really understanding and good.
Mm.
And so maybe that's maybe a contrast to what other people may face sometimes with the first kid, maybe being a bit more like needy, and things like that. Arya was actually it wasn't bad, as far as I remember, and she she definitely like missed mom a little bit, in the beginning, but I think she was really understanding of everything that was happening around us, and we're really thankful for her being just so perceptive as a young, like, I think she was like 3.5.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, and I'll just say I have a similar experience at 3.5 with Kuvi too, that she's not being extra needy or something, but she's just a toddler. Like she's 3.5 and she takes more mental energy and she's a negotiator and it's like all the things that you
yeah,
have with a toddler. Whereas with the baby, they're like, you're kind of like, okay, you're either hungry or you're sleepy or you're like, need gas, need burping, whatever. And then they sleep like 16 hours or 18 hours a day or something. So it's
yeah,
not to minimize anything. Like, when we had our first kid, obviously we were like, oh my God, your whole life changes and everything's like incredibly stressful. And it's like, you're not getting any sleep. This time going in, I was like, okay, I know I'm not going to get much sleep. That was already a known thing. I know that's not going to be forever. It's going to be like 3 months to 4 months or whatever. Then the sleep will adjust. And
yeah,
it's been more about managing, like, I think you hit it right on the head. It's like, how do we manage each of our individual relationships with each kid? How do we make sure that Anjali's getting enough time with Kubi, that I'm getting enough time with Arjun, that we're not just like splitting it completely? And frankly, like, I just know at this point everything is logistics, everything is finding time. There's not really much time between us for things. And so that's I just knew that was going to be true. So maybe I'm also just my expectations were set correctly in a way. But yeah, it's kind of amazing, man. Kubi is like a really good big sister too. She loves him already. She's like always wanting to hold him, always wanting to be like almost too much. Like it's like it's like, okay, he's still fragile. You can't just like throw him around.
yeah. That happened
Yeah.
with Arya too. They just don't understand the concept. They think it's like they think the baby is like a they've been playing with dolls a lot, so
Yeah,
they think
exactly,
it's almost like a
exactly.
toy.
Exactly. But otherwise, man, I think it's been great to get to this stage. I'm like kind of excited for them to grow up and interact more. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in those days, like Sri Ranjani, it's just really hard on the moms. Let's just shout out to moms out there,
Shout out. Yeah.
especially with the two sort of kids that are wanting your attention in some way. One that's like completely dependent on you, essentially. So that part of it, definitely
I mean,
is we'll never know, even though we want to be there for them. We'll never really know what it's like.
should we get into the dad guilt conversation? I feel like you have a perspective on dad guilt. So the thing that Vivek and I have debated a lot is like, should we as men feel guilty for sort of not being able to do the pregnancy part and the breastfeeding part of the birthing process,
Yeah,
and then are we sort
yeah.
of indebted for that forever? or how do you get over that? What's your take?
Yeah, for me, so I think my take is I don't think it's that much different than yours, but I think it's different. I think you feel it a lot more than I may feel it. Um, I think it, for me, it really started with labor and delivery. Because I think back in the day, maybe men didn't even go to that part. But nowadays we try to. I think most people in our generation will, if their wife wants them to or their partner wants them to, will want to be there for that. And it was, I mean, that's when I felt the most guilt I ever have in my probably in my entire life
Yeah,
is just
yeah.
have it just see, it wasn't. I mean, actually, no. I'll rewind that. I don't think that the feeling that I felt was guilt. I think the feeling that I felt was just pain. Like I felt the pain, not in the same way, obviously, that she was going through it, but when you see someone going through such a grueling thing, it's not a guilt that overcomes you. At least for me, it was something else. It was like a, I came to
Helplessness,
tears.
like a helplessness a
Yeah,
little bit. Yeah, I
like a
feel that. Yeah,
helplessness.
you can't
Yeah,
assist in really any significant way.
yeah, and you're seeing your, one of your most, or if not the most loved one going through a really painful process, which is like, no matter, no matter what, you're gonna feel that. And I honestly don't. Maybe the thing that I take issue with is kind of calling it a guilt. I
Mm.
think you said it right. You said it right, which is it feels more like a helplessness, an inability to be able to assist in really assist in any way. Like, and that comes out even during breastfeeding and some of the other things that moms have to go through as well. And so what ends up happening is you really have this feeling that, I can go bring her juice or things like that, but like that I try to do as much as I can, but I can't really be there and do that part of it at all.
No, but do you
There's
feel a need to do more than the 50% in other areas of life to sort of make up for that, to go beyond in what you're doing for Aria or Indy or, even Gia at that age? Or is it like, you know what, this is a part of your job description, this is part of my job description, we're equal otherwise. I don't have to do extra to make up for it.
I think I might have a feeling that I want to help out more, but I also think maybe what gets lost a little bit is the dynamic between the two partners. And like, I think the expectation is set by the birthing parent.
Mm.
And so that expectation setting happens there. Like I'm not doing any expectation setting. The expectations are coming from her. So I mean, that's kind of like the give in whatever you want to call it, like the sort of the taking over of as much as possible. Because I think there, for me, like maybe this is a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, but my partner wanted to like do a lot and I wanted to help, but she wanted to take control over a lot of things.
Mm.
So in that instance, I didn't feel guilty because she sort of wanted to take the reins and be doing it. She might have been a little bit annoyed at times when I was like, yeah, then go do it. Because what I noticed in my life was that I would I would try to do things and kind of be as supportive as possible, trying to do 60% or whatever. I mean, I don't know if you can assign a percentage to it, but do more. And oftentimes, like maybe what the way that I did something wasn't the right way, or wasn't the way that she would have done it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so like in that instance, my instinct was to say, hey, let's just however you want to split this up, and whatever things that you want me to do, like be explicit about it, and I'll do those things, and those things that you want to have full control over and take on, go for it.
Yeah,
So the split ended up being probably uneven for me because of that to an extent.
I see what you're saying. I mean, I think you're highlighting a really, it's like there's a couple dynamic that you need to navigate, and it's you're trying to do as much as you can within that actually benefits her and her workload and everything. But like, if she doesn't want you to do some of those things because she wants to do them, then it's hard for you to. I mean, not even hard for you. Like that's the right thing to do for you as a couple.
Yeah.
That's the right thing for you to do.
Yeah.
I
And I
think you're
think like
right,
I
man.
think it's
Yeah.
more like accepting, like this may be more to the personality of my partner than me. And for you, and you might feel this in other ways, which is that like for her, she like is very, she has a very specific way she likes certain things done. And she is just by her nature a lot more aware and like more cleanly about things. And like the way that she'll do, like
Yeah.
the cleaning of the bottles, like she won't trust anyone else to do it the way that
Yeah, yeah,
she
yeah.
does it.
You know the
Things
classic
like
like
that.
dad trope where it's like kids are at home with dad and we're giving them like a sink bath and then like putting them in, like that's in front of the TV or something for an extra hours. But I mean, I feel like
And I
the
think
reality,
for most
yeah.
people, like for most moms, I feel like they're just so spent that they're like, whatever, just get it done. Um, but in my case, like Sri has this extra gear. Like she has this extra gear than most people, I think, where she will just power through, even though she's doing it at the risk of her own mental and physical health in some cases.
Well, there's also this huge world of mom guilt, though. Like we're talking dad guilt. There's this mom like internet universe that guilts other moms. I feel like maybe inadvertently into being like super moms, and it's like they feel this like if I'm not giving my kids like the extra organic, like the carrots, and if I'm not giving them like extra amounts of mental nourishment, then I'm not being the best
Yeah,
100% mom. Like we don't have that, dude. As guys, we go to dinner. When we go to guy dinners, how much are we talking about the kids? That's not for lack of love for the kids, but it's like we're talking about random other stuff. But when they go to dinner, when the women go to dinner, like a lot of it's about how are you guys approaching this thing and the kids? Like, how are you giving them
yeah,
extra energy and how are you crafting their meals so they're not eating too much sugar and stuff? And it's like, there's this societal imbuing of like mom guilt that I also feel like we just cannot undo as men. It's just the reality is they feel that we don't feel that. So if I'm watching Kubi or watching the kids now, like I'll just take a different approach than Anjali would. And that's just like that's part of what like the upbringing is now. Like I don't mean as kids, I mean the upbringing as like society has now imbued this in us.
yeah. And I think maybe that's natural. Like, in what world will like we're not like robots, right? Like we can't just like all do it the same way every single thing.
Yeah.
Like we have personalities, and the way we do certain things and will be different, and the way we talk will be different. And this is true. I think like there's this world where it's like, oh, well, you should talk a certain way when you're giving feedback, or this is better for the psychology of the child, and this and that and this and that. And I think I pay less attention to that than the moms, maybe perhaps because of this level of like mom guilt or whatever you're talking about, where they want to do everything the right way. Whereas I think I personally, and I don't know if you feel this way, I personally just do things and expect that nature will run its course.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
like that nature isn't going to suddenly change after 50,000, how many ever millions of years that humans have been
Yeah.
around, right? Like these things know how to survive, whether or
Exactly.
not we're speaking to them in the right way.
I
Um,
definitely have some of that vibe, man. Like it's like with food, right? You're like, this thing is
yeah,
programmed to eat. This child will eat. Okay. Eventually this child will eat. If they don't eat dinner exactly the way that I've prepared it or whatever, eventually they will have to eat. so,
yeah,
so like those things I'm not as worried about. And I'll just say frankly, Anjali is on the same page for a lot of those things where we're more like laissez-faire about things like that. It's like this thing is programmed to survive. It will end up surviving. Obviously, everything else going right. But like the thing is, the detail stuff, like it is different for every person. It's different for every person within the couple. It's different. I even the grandparents. Like I've been living with my parents now for the last 6 months, 8 months. They have a different view, right? So it's like navigating all those things is tricky socially. Um,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
there's a very
exactly.
interesting, actually, there's an interesting political parallel. I was just reading The Economist where in Europe now they have this equal pay for equal work. I'm sorry, in the UK specifically. And it's a law. Okay. So now there's a lot of lawsuits getting filed inside a lot of supermarket chains and things where people will have to tally every job they did through the day. Okay. And like, if they're working exactly the same tasks for the same amount of hours, they have to get paid the same. And if they weren't paid exactly the same, they get sued. And it's this crazy requirement now on companies to like ensure that every micro task and tasking of the employees is equal. And sorry, I was just thinking of this as a super parallel to this because it's like there's also this component of like there's no way in which the two parents could ever be 100% equal in everything they do. There's going to be different tasks. There's going to be different jobs.
Yeah.
I think it's probably just incumbent on the two parents to talk about what they expect out of the relationship and out of the child raising, and also like understand what the other parent needs for relaxation. What time off do they need? Maybe both parents aren't the same capability to go hard in the paint 100% of the time, and you need different amounts of relaxation, that kind of thing. It's like it's just a couple thing. I feel like I mean, taking it back to the law thing about the UK law thing, I just so disagree with the like putting that burden of this, you have to now put yourself in this tiny box where this person is doing the exact same amount of work as this person, and otherwise their pay inequity is unjustifiable. It's like, no, no, no. You got to give some people some leeway to figure out what people need to do to make things effective. Otherwise,
Yeah, I
you're
mean, in
constraining
some
the
way you
system.
have to, in some way you sort of have, I think you have to sort of judge the outputs versus what the inputs are, right? Like
Hmm.
if someone is doing a better job of cleaning, then they get a better pay for their cleaning or something like that. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
versus, like how many times did you pick up the scrubber? Like that's not relevant. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're metricizing the wrong thing, right? Because I used to, even at school, right? I used to love that we had these tests and homework and whatever that would like, okay, you could study however you wanted, but if you did well on the test, that's what mattered, right? And I knew people that would study 10 times as much as me, but they'd be like sort of studying, half watching TV and like sort of doing some other thing. And at the end of the day, they'd be like, oh my God, I studied for 24 hours for this test and I didn't get a good grade. I'm like, did you really study for 24 hours or were you kind of half dicking around or not effectively studying? So I like the idea of like just understand the output. This is true for everything we just talked
yeah,
about.
and I think that's very much like in my line of work where I'm doing a little bit of a different role now. I'm at a very early stage startup, but for most of my career, I've been in sales. So you're only judged by the output.
Hmm.
Like you don't even have to be in the office if you hit your numbers,
Yeah.
like in some way. I mean, of course, it's not exactly like that, but like there's like, a level of like if you're performing well and you're hitting your revenue targets and the outputs are good, then we're not going to ask you a million questions about why didn't come in on a Friday. You know what I mean? So I think that's sort of the world that I've always lived in, and to hear about something like this where it's like, oh, how many vegetables did you clean or what? I don't know what the metrics would be.
But your current job seems a little different, right? You seem to have more in-office expectation and longer days. Is that just the nature of like you're more in a leadership position and it's smaller, so all hands on deck?
It's just that it's smaller, and I think I agree that um, one of the benefits of being a small team is that you can move nimbly and fast, and um, some of that resolution is lost if you're only on Zoom and doing Slack, even for a couple days a week. Uh, I think it's okay to and I think we're truly in a time right now where we're post pandemic. And there was a time where we had to get very used to working remotely and being on Zoom and Slack and things of that nature. And I think my video is having some issue. There we
Yeah,
go.
it's back. Yep.
So I think we're in a post pandemic world, but I think like if you I mean, I think there were still remote jobs even before COVID, but I think COVID made it the norm to not be in the office, and we're going back to a time where it's a norm to be in the office for many companies and for many people. And I think at a startup, it's especially important that that resolution is there because you really do need to have clear, like you can't just like say bye, like have a meeting, understand what each other said, and go and do your thing and come back. Like that iterative process in an early stage is like it's literally happening at that time. So, like, I think I've been pleasantly surprised by the level of productivity you can have, and you can like really see each other doing the thing, and there's never a question in your head of like, oh, is this person really doing like that thing? Like,
Mm.
I think there's a lot of avoidance of doubt when it comes to being in person. So I personally do like it. I think it's important to have some flexibility around it so that you have a good trust in the company where if you need to work from home one day for some reason or whatever, it's like there's a escape hatch where it's totally fine. But that the norm is that you're in the office.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I've always been that way. Like I've always felt more productive and more energized to do work when I'm in person than when fully remote. I remember having a really tough time during COVID, and it was really depressing. And I ended up, like maybe drinking too much and doing the wrong, like incentivizing the wrong behaviors, because you're just not getting that stimulation from being around the people you work with, or people you love too, like people you like, love, or friends and family as well. So I definitely think that I mean, like, imagine if you could only see your family and friends over Zoom and Slack. Like, you definitely would lose some.
I
There's
mean,
something
we had
lost
that,
there.
right? During COVID, we had that, and it was exactly what you're saying. It was definitely a loss. I feel it 100%, man. I'm hybrid, right? And so for me, the days that I'm in office, even if I see like two people those days, right, is different and better than the days that I'm at home. It's just distinctly different. And I do feel like, a lot of younger people who start their careers, we had the benefit of starting our careers in office, learning from
Yeah.
people and like getting that mentorship and everything. And it's just the walking around and talking to someone, talking to a manager or talking to someone who's not even on your team. Those are the things like you just completely lose that on Zoom because you're never going to randomly Zoom call someone who you would have seen in the kitchen for 5 minutes. It just doesn't make sense. Like we tried this at Plenty. We tried to do these like, oh, like let's do a random Zoom with someone in the company every week for 15 minutes. And yeah, okay, but it feels so manufactured. Like
In a
it's
time when it
just
was a necessity, it served its purpose.
sure it's a band-aid.
But in a time
Like,
when it's not mandatory, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, we were in a lockdown scenario where unless you were an essential person, an essential worker, the guidance from the community on healthcare and other things was just stay distanced and don't be in person if you don't need to be.
yeah.
And if you're in that period of time, and there was this, it still exists out there. There's this tool in Slack called Donut, which would just like,
Donut. Yeah, that was what it was. That's what it was.
it would automatically give you a weekly person to meet up with,
Yeah, yeah.
and talk to, and that's like, um, cool, and it was good when we had a mandatory lockdown, but we can't live the rest of our lives like that, I don't
Yeah.
think. And I don't
Yeah.
think it makes much sense to do that. And I think, like, I've seen people who are still currently remote. I've talked to some recently who are still fully remote. There's just so much lost in not being there in person, and there's almost like you're a second class citizen in the company if the company is actually not remote.
Yeah, true.
um,
So true. I mean, dude, I even see this. You're in San Francisco, so you're seeing sort of what I would call now the San Francisco revival happening a little bit.
Real
And
time, yeah.
I think it's directly related to the in-office policies of the cities and us getting out of the COVID pandemic. Like, I was talking to someone from San Jose yesterday. They're feeling the same thing in San Jose. I was walking around Palo Alto the other day, and like, there's so many shops coming back into the downtown and into the city, and it's just like we just entered 4 years of like the most sort of semi dystopian social experiment that you could enter where everyone was remote, and it just not only affected work productivity, it affected people's like compliance with laws, it affected their social understanding, like where do I fit into this society, right? And it
Yeah.
just like I think you're going to start to see things like improve everywhere across the board in cities at least, where people are finally like, oh, okay, I'm seeing people, I'm feeling more socially connected. There's more dynamic business opportunity in the downtowns. Like it cascades. Everything's kind of better, honestly. It other than some of the small home stuff, not small, I shouldn't say small. So other than some of the home stuff, like I do think it'd be very hard to have raised a puppy without any remote allowance, or to have raised a child without any remote allowance. Like there's important things in certain phases of life that we as Americans are really bad at, especially if you can't pay for the support and pay for your way out of some of those things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. It did have its affordances as it related to early child rearing. We experienced that with our second child. And you, as you mentioned, Juno, you got Juno during that time, your dog. And I think definitely, like, we got our dog and had our first kid during non-COVID times. But honestly, I think the affordances were there enough because we're in knowledge worker type of roles that
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
require you to be in office. The affordances were still there. Like, you
And
could
you
work from
figure it
home.
out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you could work from home and you could figure it out. I mean, I think, there's got to be some saying out there about, like, constraint being the mother of creativity or something like
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
right? Like,
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
um, where it's like when you have certain things that are non-negotiables, you find a way, and it's not the end of the world.
You're right. You're right. I mean, I just benefited from those two things, like first kid and first and dog during the pandemic. But you're right that I would have just done something else. I would have come home for lunch and walked the dog and then gone back to work, or I would have, you
Yeah.
know, like
And I
hired
remember
someone
doing
to
that
do the dog
With
laundry.
Indy, our first dog. I remember doing, or not first dog, our dog. I remember doing that. Um, and actually, it's a good time to bring up the update. Actually, it's been a part of my life that's been really hard recently. Is that Indy, our dog, our first child in many ways, has cancer, and he's like going through a really, really tough time right now.
Uh,
And
uh,
it's been a part of life that's been really, really hard. But I just remember early days with him, like, we would just, we lived close enough. We were lucky that we lived close enough by to home. So we could come home and let him out and have a little playtime with him, and make sure that he wasn't like really anxious sitting at home alone in those early days as a puppy. And so we were able to really um, make it work somehow.
yeah, yeah. How have you guys been with Indy the last? Has he been still able to run around and do some of the stuff he
He's
likes,
less
or
able to do that.
yeah,
He's, without going into too much detail, we're basically using a bit of a like, this has been happening for a long time with dogs and humans. So there's now like, or there has been for a long time, like sort of a quality of life rubrics out there where we're sort of on a day-to-day basis, measuring and kind of internally gauging um, what his quality of life is based on certain metrics. Um, some of them are qualitative, some of them are not. And we want to give him. Uh, we don't want to do anything drastic without it being warranted, but we also don't want him to live with a poor quality of life. So that's the balance. And
yeah,
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 we're just taking it day by day.
yeah. I mean, first I'll just I'm so sad about this for you and the family, and like just love Indy as a dog, and I'm just for
Yeah,
his whole life. Yeah, so
yeah.
it's extremely sad for
Yeah,
me to see that
I'm not
too.
one to, I don't think I've ever, maybe you can call me a cold kind of person, but like even when my grandparents passed or things like that, I never really had a visceral outward reaction to it. Even when I got married or big joyous moments in life, I've never been a crier, but I've had a tough time. I've been crying and letting it out in ways that it's new for me, like these
Yeah,
feelings in some
yeah.
way. So it's been hard,
I'm
man. It's
sorry,
been really
man.
hard.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to ask you though if you feel comfortable discussing a little bit of the philosophical question with me related to what you said, which is
Yeah.
I find it really interesting that the way we think about dogs and their treatment being humane is that we have this rubric, which is like, do they have a good quality of life? Are they able to do some of the things in their life that they should be able to do to have a good life? And if those things start to become not true, we use the word humane, which is like, is it human almost, right? Is it humane to keep them alive, to have to keep feeding them or whatever? Or should we actually give them release? But we don't at all think about humans that way. Like you
Yeah,
and I
it's
know
odd. Yeah.
many older humans. We know many older, generational people. Some of my grandparents suffered from this. Some of Anjali's did for sure, where they just
Yeah.
lived too long, frankly. Like if I had gone through that rubric, it would have been like, no, no, can't do this, can't do this, can't do this. In fact, if you had been able to ask them, they would have been like, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to be here. But there's no allowance for that release, which feels so strange to me and frankly
And some
inhumane.
countries do have it. I think like maybe it's Sweden or like there's some
Yeah,
countries
some
where
European countries. Yeah.
you can have euthanasia for humans.
What's your view on it? Do you think it should be legal broadly? You think it should be like heavily restricted but legal, or you think it should be illegal?
I think it should be legal.
Like broadly
Um,
legal? Like if you went even and said, enough times,
I
I
think
as a
it
even as
should
a
be
healthy
it should
person.
be legal the same way we have advanced directives for this as it relates to if I'm in a vegetative state and stuff. You should be able to say you know I want to go. Like there's advanced directives for like pulling the plug, for example, if you're in a coma and stuff like that. I think there should be the same thing, same level of thing. You should be able to define, here's what the rubric is for me. I want to be able to declare that I'm not feeling this way and be able to like, be euthanized. I should have that choice. It's funny. Not well. It's not funny, but it's like it's sad and kind of darkly humorous. where my dad has actually like come to me and been like, "Do not let me suffer," like
Yeah. Yeah.
like things like that, where I'm like, "It's gonna be up to me." Like that's crazy.
Well, yeah, but what an incredibly important conversation for him to have had with you, though. Like, because you won't sometimes be able to ask that in a situation where you do
Yeah,
need
so
to
it's
know
just it's pretty
what does he
simple to
want.
me.
You
Like
know?
once you get to maybe a certain age or maybe a certain time in your life, people should maybe write it down. Maybe just like write it down, or even we have the capability now. Even if you don't know how to write, you should be able to record or say something that's like, "Here's what I want."
Yeah. It'd be interesting if
And
every year we redid that. Let's say, right, as part of our life insurance policy or something. Let's say when we signed up for
right,
life insurance, we had to write a statement of if I was to go into a situation where I was unstable and whatever, and you had to write some conditions and whatever, like you say, advanced directive. It'd be kind of a good thing, I think, for society for that to be a normal thing. And then you get older to say, if I lack, like exactly like you said for a dog, if this is my rubric for life, and if seven of nine out of 10 of these things become untrue, and even if I'm unresponsive, I wish to kind of be put out of my
yeah. I
misery,
mean, there's
right?
got to be some sort of a template. It might be a little bit of a longer doc, and there might be some legalese or whatever it is, right?
Yeah,
But you
sure.
should
Yeah,
make
yeah. Of
that
course,
make
there
that
should
make
be a
that
lot of legalese.
make sure that there's something there for people to be able to do. And I don't know, I actually don't know what the current status is of the the legality and what's even available and not. But like, um, yeah, I totally have seen my grandparents in some cases go through this type of stuff, and it's tough.
Yeah, yeah. I mean it. Yeah, and it's all to say, like I think that we do actually, in many cases, I believe we do the right thing for dogs, which is I do think that at a certain point you can tell that a dog is suffering, and we give them the ability to sort of stop that, and we don't just force them to continue with that suffering. And so,
Yeah,
um, anyways, all that, yeah, just I would wish you guys all the best with the what's going
yeah.
on there. I hope you get to
Thanks, man.
spend
Yeah,
time
it's
with him.
tough.
I
It's
hope I
tough.
get to see him
I
again.
think I'm lucky. I feel lucky in one way, which is that we've talked to a few other friends who, they went to the vet and they were like, you have to like make a decision right now of what you're
Mm,
gonna do. Um,
mm.
and at least we didn't have that, where we actually have been able to spend extended time with him. He's been able to see everyone who cares about, most people who care about him, and play more, and have the last parts of his life. We know it's going to come to an end soon, but the last parts of his life have had their moments of serious joy, and people have been able to come to terms with it in some way.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um,
But switching gears a little bit, I think one
yeah.
thing I wanted to revisit, something that we talk about almost in every pod, is just what's going on in the world, what's going on with politics, what's the deal. And one take that I have that I think we may share is like, I was we were both, I think, one of the first reasons we did this podcast was because of the Trump election, where he got elected in 2024. And I think we both had a high level of optimism that, hey, you know what, maybe this isn't the end of the world, because there's some of these policies and things that we think actually are worth begging the question on. Um, you know, my take so far has been like, I had that feeling up until a certain point where I think, um, of late, I've really really felt like a lot of the I think the outcomes that they wanted, some of them are still valid, but the execution has just been totally botched in many ways.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, I want to get your thoughts on it too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say for the first thing you said, I sat down after the election and I was frankly very disappointed about the outcome. And I sat down and I was like, okay, what are all the things that I could be optimistic about moving forward? And I wrote a list down. And then looking at that list, and then I also wrote down what was I really worried about. And looking at that list, and then coming 2 days later to us doing the podcast, you're absolutely right that I came in thinking, okay, he's asked a bunch of interesting questions. Among those, the ones that I was most excited about getting sort of momentum on were the deficit and the debt, and thinking about how could you work to reduce those, because those seem like absolutely fundamental and systemic issues. Um, Maybe deregulation to a certain degree, where there is a lot of red tape in the government. I've experienced it now with the agricultural sector, and a lot of it is just inbuilt and unnecessary. And I was like excited for some of that deregulation. And then overall, like I think maybe foreign policy to some degree. I think Biden was a little too quiet on a lot of foreign policy issues, and I think we just needed someone to shake some stuff up. And you know, obviously there's a huge variance factor, but having someone who's unpredictable in the White House isn't the worst thing from a foreign policy perspective. Like you get a lot more negotiating leverage when people don't know what you're going to do. But on each of those things, I will say that I've been like sorely disappointed. So like Doge has basically been like a fake reduction program, I would say, and also like you said, an execution nightmare. And if you and I talked about this before, but if you actually wanted to do this, like you need to do it methodically and you need to do it in a way which eliminates positions that are truly unnecessary. That takes some evaluation. And there hasn't been any like thoughtfulness put into it. So that's the same. And the last thing I'll just say before I throw it back to you is like I think the most emblematic of this has been tariffs. Um, if you have a true and deep sort of feeling or like knowledge that okay, we need manufacturing to come back to us, then what you need to do is you need to put tariffs on, but you need to do them in a way that's messaged years before, slowly come on, let the manufacturing sectors ramp up, let businesses prepare, then put them on, then keep them on in a way that you know is going
And
to stay
also,
on.
also,
Yeah.
you know, be very specific about what manufacturing you want to bring
What are
back
you
and
tariffing
putting a
exactly?
tariff on the specific set of goods or subset of industries that you want to revive here,
Yeah.
which there's no thought process at all been put to that, I think. It's just been across the board and very,
Well,
very
because
botched.
it's a, both a negotiation, apparently. It's a fundraising tactic, apparently. These are things he highlights all the time. But those two things are like completely in opposition to it's going to stay here forever, right? And it's going to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. Like there, all of these constraints are not aligning with each other. And then also like, oh, the tariffs might go away if we negotiate with someone is like a zero incentive for someone to move their business. In fact, I was talking to a business the other day. They're manufacturing in China. They did two things which are interesting but so counterproductive to what Trump wants. The first is they shipped a bunch of their products to Mexico and they're holding them in a warehouse in Mexico, just waiting for him to reverse policy. They're just literally they're filling up warehouses in Mexico until the day he reverses policy. Then they're going to truck them all in the day he reverses policy. That's how little they trust him. And the second thing they're doing is they're moving manufacturing from China to Thailand. So it's like, great, we moved it out of China. It's not coming to the US, it's just going to a different country. And then it's going to get manufactured here. And all they're doing is moving the minimum amount to not get into compliance issues with the tariff to Thailand. So it's like, what have you solved? You've just essentially increased the price for Americans. You haven't increased the jobs. You've increased the inefficiency of the supply chain, and you've caused the US's reputation in the world to become. And this is probably the biggest problem actually that we have is like nobody's going to negotiate with us now when literally Trump negotiated the US Canada trade agreement in 2018, comes into office this time, is like, this is the worst trade agreement I've ever seen. It's like, dude, you negotiated it. Like, so why would anyone negotiate a trade agreement with you now if you're just going to come back in 2 years and be like, actually throw the agreement out. We need a new policy. It's like, okay, there's no way to run, it's not a way to run a railroad, you know?
Yeah, and on the one hand, I feel like you could say, okay, well, Trump won't be in office for forever, and you know, the U.S. will regain its standing, and we still have a fairly big economy and the biggest economy and the biggest army and all these things. Whereas on the other side of that argument is like, well, nothing lasts forever, and maybe this is the first thing to the first set of things to really bring down what has been what I would consider a powerful nation, the most powerful
Yeah.
nation in the
What
world
do you
for
think
for
that
for
that
eons.
decline could look like practically? You've always been a bit of a prepper, not prepper in like you have a basement in your house that you're going to go live in, but thinking about the downside risk. What do you think could happen, and how are you doing anything about it?
I have been really, really. I just have felt like my hands are really tied. I've just held like all my, like, for example, stock positions and stuff like that. Over the years, I have brought a lot more into just cash savings. But what happens if the dollar is not as strong, which
Yeah,
is a
exactly.
serious possibility? Um, so I have not really planned very well for that scenario. So holding more cash than I was before. A lot of my investments in the market have stayed. I haven't bought more, but I haven't sold also, which has been very much to my detriment if you just look at the portfolio over the last year. And um, just because generally stocks are down. But I also feel like, your question was sort of like, what do you think? How have you been prepping? Like, what do you think maybe the next steps of the downside risk? And to me, it feels like if you have a continuation of this policy, and one thing I am optimistic about is that, you know, Trump is someone who can like of any leader ever will be very fast to reverse course and deny anything that happened previously, which is actually maybe a good thing, right? Like he might just be like, oh, that didn't work, let's scrap everything and go back to normal. Like I think that's a
It's
really
possible.
a serious possibility. But imagine if that didn't happen and we just kind of stayed the course on this and let it play out. You would see a massive rise in inflation. You would see essentially like cost of living going up very, very dramatically. I don't think you'd really see a lot of manufacturing jobs coming back. I think you'd see a lot of countries calling Trump's bluff a little bit and not willing to come to the negotiating table, kind of like China has been doing. And I think you'd see a shift of power towards nations like China that have been already holding a lot of control over supply chains, having control over a lot of essential manufacturing plus inputs for manufacturing, and essential metals and essential things that are required for battery manufacturing and all these kinds of things that they're going to continue to have over time. And over time, you'll just see the U.S. getting more and more squeezed until there's a point where there's sort of a changing of the guard in many ways
Yeah.
in terms of just economic power, consolidating more with China. And so that's probably the biggest thing. And there's a lot of downstream implications to that with what happens to Taiwan and Hong Kong and all these other like Asian countries that are kind of um, right there next to China. And there will be some sort of if that in the case that all of what I'm saying is a doomsday scenario, if all of this kind of comes to be, there will be. I think there's a sort of there's a war that's on the
Exactly.
horizon, right?
Yeah.
That would have to happen.
I
So,
was gonna say, with declining power of any empire, I think they start to lash out. And if that's
well,
us, yeah,
the countries surrounding will start getting impacted,
yeah.
and uh, will need to band together somehow if they want to keep their sovereignty, and will likely seek the help of other countries to come help. So
Mm,
that's
mm.
what ends up happening,
That's kind of
right?
the Russia-Ukraine story. That's the China-Taiwan story. That's the
Yep.
India-Kashmir story. It's like you start to
And you'll
see
see
those
this like
countries.
alignment.
Yeah,
There'll be there's the axis of this and that, and there'll be an alignment of countries,
yeah.
and you'll see a World War III.
And this is where I think, these tariffs are like the a huge own goal is that we're further pushing our biggest neighbors and partners forever into the arms of they're forced into the more stable arms of the opposition, right?
Yeah,
And this is where also like even if he reverses course, which I hope he does, you did it at the expense of burning so much credibility. So much credibility. Like if you just think about like if this was one of our friends and they were acting this way, and then eventually they came back and said, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. Like, don't worry about what I just did." You'd be like, "Fine, that's all great, but now I can't trust you."
yep,
And
exactly.
yeah,
And
maybe you'd still
I
be
think
mild friends with them, but
you didn't have that possibility, and now that's a possibility. So
yeah, exactly.
um, that's where some of the steps that have been taken have been just not well thought out, without very much thought given to the downstream impacts, and like maybe that's what the original plan was always, but
No, but
I
man, I
don't
mean,
know.
this is where like I think we were talking about All In. You introduced me to All In like a year ago, actually, right
Yeah,
now. And I love the podcast until recently, and part of the recent problem was not that they're all kind of like a lot of them have become right wing, but that they seem to be like denying the reality of some of the issues. Like, and I'm like, look, you say it's a plan all along. Like Sachs will say, like, oh yeah, it was a plan all along, a masterful stroke to get 10% tariffs on without anyone complaining, and China kind of being in the bullseye. It's like you're not at all considering the reputational cost to the US. You're thinking it's a zero cost thing that we did that. It's not a zero cost thing at all. Like we just burned every reputation we had to do that. So, and now you may even go remove it like in 2 weeks, just frivolously. So
The
they
worst
just
thing
seem,
about it, honestly, with All In is I feel like they've almost become a state-run media organization for
yeah,
Trump. And there's one holdout, which is Jason Calcanis is what the one holdout. Like even David Friedberg, because he's gone along with them for a lot of the deficit reduction and tariff bullshit. Um, he used to be, I thought, the voice of reason, but even he has kind of stumbled into this role of being a bit of a megaphone
yeah,
for the policies of the administration, and it's just been a little disappointing. Not just a little; it's been very disappointing to see the way it's been handled with just one of the four original dudes, like actually calling calling a spade a spade. Um, which is it's just like with that level of intellectual horsepower in a podcast, which you'd imagine is a lot of intellectual horsepower, you start to see like, I don't know, what's really actually going on here? Is it like they're really in cahoots with the administration? And there's this huge point made by Chamat that like, oh, the administration is like returning my calls, and it's like,
yeah.
dude, like you're the only you're like very much part of their inner circle. So like of course they're
Yeah,
going to return your
exactly,
calls.
exactly, exactly.
Oh,
And
the
you're
Biden
basically saying
administration didn't return my call. It's like,
crony
well, hey,
capitalism is good, is what you're saying.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you pay to play is what you want. Okay. Like that's fine. But the government has to serve everyone. I agree with you, man. It's kind of disappointing. It is. I still listen to it though, because I want to hear the arguments for the other side. I want to hear
yeah.
what they're saying the justifications are.
It's the same reason I
Yeah.
even till today, maybe not as much anymore because I have really avoided the typical news channels. But there was a time when I would often watch Fox News, and there was a
Hmm.
time where I would often, go to Breitbart and go to some of these news outlets that tended to lean towards MAGA a little bit more just to see what was being said. Um, and I'll continue to do that. It's part of just having a more balanced media diet, in my
Yeah.
opinion, and I'll
Yeah.
continue to do that. And that's not going to change
Agreed.
that.
Agreed. Agreed. Hey, I think I need to go soon, but I'm glad we restarted it, and maybe
Yeah,
we'll
dude, I'm glad we did this.
get a couple interviews on the slate soon. Again, I
Yeah,
like
maybe we can
those.
do a. I think like if I had to call we'll get a couple interviews hopefully soon, and then we have some coming up for sure that are uh, in the chamber. I would say the other thing that I would want to chat about with you at some point is just I know that the Warriors are in a playoff run right
Oh
now.
yeah, we
Would
gotta do
love to
it,
talk
man.
some sports. Yeah,
And we gotta do
and
it
our
soon
friends,
because
Anant and his what's Anant's friend's name again?
oh,
Jay. Anant and
Jay,
Jay have started a
yes.
new podcast. So maybe we even do a little collab podcast or
Oh,
something.
let's
That would
do
be
a
cool.
collab. That'd be fun. Yeah, the
Yeah,
We
that
Still
could be
Believe
fun.
podcast for anyone listening to this point in this podcast.
Yeah,
Cool, man. Yeah, I like it. Let's try to get this back on a weekly, at least.
yeah.
Yeah,
At least
yeah,
us talking, and we'll sprinkle in some interviews as they come.
yeah. Perfect. All right.
All right,
Talk to you
man.
later.
Take care. Have a great day. Bye.